Donald Trump's Epstein Deflection campaign, it's worked. Not universally, but meaningfully, and I'll explain. We're starting with the fact that the Washington Post did an analysis of more than 500,000 social media posts and podcasts to see how the chatter about Jeffrey Epstein waxed and waned. And of all the content from over 450 right-wing influencers and politicians, the Post found 10,000 posts mentioning Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell during June and July. And while fewer than 1 in every 200 mentioned the pair during June, that ratio shot up to 1 in 20 the following month. It even reached as much as 1 in 12 on some days, and it peaked on July 18th when 1,000 posts mentioned Epstein or Maxwell. But that was also the day that Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard released documents purporting to show that the Obama administration conspired to keep Trump out of office in 2016 using Russiagate. And that story, it ended up really picking up traction on July 22nd and 23rd when she went on Fox News and gave a White House briefing detailing the alleged plot in her own words.
There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false.
And if that was an attempt to distract from Epstein, apparently it worked, because according to the Post, on July 19th, about twice as many posts mentioned Obama as mentioned Epstein or Maxwell. And by the 23rd, over 1 in 10 posts were about Obama, which was nearly 3 times as much as Epstein, all of which was really exemplified with Fox News. Not only did they mention Obama more than 3 times as much as Epstein over several days in July, they mentioned Epstein 5 times less than Newsmax, 11 times less than CNN, and 15 times less than MSNBC. I mean, hell, according to one report, over the course of a week at Fox, they mentioned Epstein 53 times and Sydney Sweeney 766. Right? And this is something we also saw reflected in politicians as well as online influencers. With some, like Sean Farash, even explicitly saying, the Russia hoax is more important than Epstein. I don't care who that offends. Though also, like others, they didn't even need the Obama conspiracy to lure them off the Epstein beat. They just needed their marching orders from Trump.
Let's continue with Trump. He says selfish people are trying to hurt MAGA. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, etc.? They created the Epstein files.
Right, Dinesh D'Souza was a fun one to look at in particular because he posted about Epstein more than 500 times up until that point since 2022. But then suddenly he does this about face on July 14th in a video titled, "Is it time to move on from the Epstein files?" Right, and his answer was yes.
Because we've had a lot of these premises floating around. There's an Epstein list. He was running a blackmail operation. But many of these things, now that we think about it, were relying on information to be supplied, not information that actually existed.
But also with this, I'll say, even if the Epstein story is getting crowded out by other news, there's also several reasons to believe that this is going to keep surfacing. The first thing being that even as general Epstein talk has quieted down a bit, the Post analysis found that among people who are still hung up on Epstein, criticism of the White House has become more dominant. Right, and then the second reason being that this week, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed the Justice Department for the complete Epstein files, as well as 6 former attorneys general, 2 former FBI directors, and Bill and Hillary Clinton for depositions about their involvement in the Epstein case. And then finally, I'd say the third reason is that the White House is reportedly debating whether to release an audio recording and transcript of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's 9-hour interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. And with that, you had 3 sources telling CNN that Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Blanche would meet at the VP's residence on Wednesday to discuss the matter. And actually, you had 2 officials adding that the materials could be made public as early as this week. And that delay reportedly stemming from disagreements about whether releasing them would just draw more attention to the story. But then with all that, it's not obvious, if all of that's going to satisfy the critics, especially when you have Trump saying stuff like this about Blanche's interview.
And I think he probably wants to make sure that, people that should not be involved or aren't involved are not hurt by something that would be very, very unfortunate, very unfair to a lot of people.
So then with that, you're seeing things like, according to CNN, there have also been internal discussions about Blanche holding a press conference or doing a high-profile interview, possibly with Joe Rogan. And so, all of a sudden there's this prospect of a senior White House official having to sit down for 2 or 3 hours of questioning about the case. And while Rogan, he's not exactly famous for challenging his guests or doing thorough research and prep for his interviews, he has recently been very critical of the White House.
Like, look, where's the Epstein files? Boo, can't find them. Don't exist. Like, they can get away with man.
The whole thing was nuts. And then he's like, well, we have a film. We're going to release that film. And the film has a minute missing from it.
Yeah.
Like, do you think we're babies? Like, what is this?
In the Blanche Maxwell interview, he's expressed skepticism that it uncovered anything important.
The smartest thing for her to do is to keep her fucking mouth shut, which is what she did.
Right.
They put her in a cushy prison where she could do yoga.
Which, to speak on that, last week, of course, it was reported that Maxwell got transferred from the low security prison where she had been staying in Florida to a minimum security prison in Texas. One that notably houses inmates convicted of nonviolent offenses and white-collar crimes, and it's even been called the cushiest federal detention facility in the country. With, in fact, the regional vice president for the Federal Prison Officers Union telling NBC, "You ever hear the old Club Fed they used to talk about? This is one of those places. It's really a great place to do your time if you're an inmate." Right, so you hear that, and then you hear a consultant for female inmates explaining to the Washington Post that for the Florida prison, you're looking at double razor wire around the fence, trucks driving around it, cops with rifles, they're locking the doors of the housing units at night. But for the Texas prison, you're looking at dorms with bunk beds and suite housing, unlocked doors, fewer guards to inmates, freedom to roam the compound, and just one layer of razor wire fencing. And very importantly, not only did Maxwell's transfer reportedly happen just days after Blanche interviewed Maxwell, it's also against the Bureau of Prisons rules. Because convicted sex offenders, they have to be held in at least a low security level facility. And the only way that you get around that is to get a waiver from the Bureau's designation and sentence computation center. Right? And that, as you had experts telling the Post, that it is especially rare for sex offenders like her to get that treatment, and that even if she did cooperate with the DOJ, she would almost never get moved to a facility like the one in Texas. Now with that, I will say it's currently unclear why and how Maxwell got transferred, not to mention who ordered it, but you did have a reporter asking Trump about it.
Were you aware of, and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department?
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
And do you believe that she is
It's not a very uncommon thing.
But really, whatever the reason for the transfer, people with knowledge of how the system works, they're just kind of flabbergasted by the news. For example, one former prison warden saying, "Someone gave special preference to Maxwell that, to my knowledge, no other inmate currently in the Federal Bureau of Prisons has received." And adding, "It's a country club. Inmates, if they have a sex offense, are not going to a place like that. Period. It's truly unheard of." And you're even seeing things like NBC obtaining screenshots of a private Facebook group for current and former federal prison staffers erupting in shock and outrage after hearing about Maxwell's transfer. With one writing, "As a retired BOP employee, this makes me sick," and another adding, "Since when are sex offenders allowed at the camp? I don't care who she snitched on, she's a damn human trafficker." With a former BOP chief of internal affairs calling the move a travesty of justice. Right, in all of this, it's coming after Virginia Giuffre's family expressed horror and disgust at the news, saying in a statement, "This is the justice system failing victims right before our eyes. The American public should be outraged by the special treatment afforded to a pedophile and a criminally charged child sex offender."